Well, the House has reached a settlement. Colleges can pay athletes. How's that going to affect Vandy? We're going to check it out with my man, Chris Gordy. Stick around.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Joining me is the man, the myth, the legend, the host of Locked On SEC. It's Chris Gordy. Chris, thanks for joining me, man. The House has reached a settlement, and the long story short, colleges can pay athletes now. And there's a rev share and there's all that kind of stuff. So what were your initial thoughts conference-wide with this settlement?
Well, just from like a college football perspective, the word amateurism is dead, right? I mean, this is, I never in a million years thought I would see a day where, the schools themselves can pay players. Like I thought NIL was the start of a new revolution where, wow, okay, so players can sign endorsement deals and all this kind of stuff. And then, they kind of got into a gray area where you had boosters paying for recruits and all this. But I'm like, all right, everybody's making money except for the actual, talent for all these decades. And so, I think the advent of what happened was college football used to be $1 million business. And in the last decade, it became $1 billion business. And that's really where, push came to shove. 20 years ago, you used to convince me, well, they're getting room and board and getting a free scholarship. That's tuition's enough. But no, when it became $1 billion business, no, tuition was not enough. Like you gotta give the players their cut. So, but yeah, to get to a point where, I mean, and rightfully so. I mean, ESPN and the SEC signed a $1 billion TV contract. Went into effect a couple years ago. Like that right there is absolutely insanity. And so, now there's a way to make part of that TV revenue become revenue that can go towards the players. Now, I still think the bulk of this is very small. I mean, everybody say 20 million per school, 20 million per school. Okay, great. But that's for all of athletics. That's for all your sports. And so, a couple articles kind of said you're looking at about 13 to 16 million going towards the football team, depending on what school you are, right? Because different schools could pay more, maybe we want to put more towards basketball. Maybe we want to put more towards baseball, whatever. But it still is like, if we're talking 13 to 16 million for the football team, you're not going to have guys making $1 million. Like that's not good for anybody. I mean, think of it as an NFL salary cap. Like, there are some teams that pay their quarterback 20% of the cap, but like that's not great for business because you got so many other guys to pay. And so that's going to be the fascinating part of this. That's why you have schools hiring people, quote unquote GMs. Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl was hired by Oklahoma to be their general manager. You're going to have a lot of things like that, but the other story here, Corey, is that NIL is not dead, that you're going to have an NIL clearinghouse and an accounting firm in Deloitte that's going to approve NIL deals. But what they're going to measure is it fair market value based off, whatever metrics they have. And so gone are the days where, Bryce Underwood can step in and get 9-10 million from a Michigan booster. You can't do that. If the Michigan booster wants to pay him that, you got to do it as an NIL deal. And I'm sorry, there's no NIL deal worth 10 million. Like you're not, like, what is that? A social post a day? And he's going to be the face of our TV commercials. Yeah. At most you're talking $1 million. Like you can't, so that's going to be the interesting part about all this is how they regulate that. But that was the big gist of, okay, we did our part. We're going to pay the players directly from the school, but we want to get rid of a lot of this phantom, stupid multi-million-dollar boosters coming in and giving 17-year-olds millions of dollars when they haven't even played it down yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something like with the whole Nico situation, does this whole settlement, does this whole new way of doing business, do you think it's going to help curb some of these drastic transfers, guys transferring twice in, within a 4-month span and, the whole crazy NIL stuff that just got completely out of control? Does this put some guardrails on things enough to where you're going to get back to developing developing players and recruiting them out of high school and going back to that model, things like that. I listened to your show earlier with Graham, and it seemed like his opinion was headed that way, where high school, if you're still putting an emphasis on high school recruiting, that's going to be kind of the way now. And it really is starting to become like an NFL model where, you're getting guys in, you're developing them, and things are kind of more on equal footing.
Yeah, I think, the interesting part is, is it going to curb guys transferring out? Well, I think the toughest part here that I'm having a hard time dealing with is they're still not employees. And so, when they signed a contract or whatever we're going to call it and getting a percentage of the revenue from the school, what's the bar them or hold them to that? And, okay, is this just a 1-year deal? Is it a 4-year deal? Do I get this every year and contractually, how do you hold them to that? So right. That's the tough part. Is I still don't think we've solved that problem. I do think we are going to get very soon to a ruling on one transfer portal. I think most coaches and ADs and everybody else is on board with that, closing the spring portal and saying, look, we're just going to do one portal, whether it's January, whatever. There's one portal for everybody, and we're all going to abide by it. I think most coaches want that because, that's why we didn't have spring games this year, because coaches are so paranoid. They didn't want to showcase their third and fourth string wide receivers that are immediately going to jump in the portal and go elsewhere. So I think that's the first step here with that. But two, again, like you sign, I don't know, Alabama signs a kid to a deal and it's a future quarterback. Let's just say Keelan Russell, for example. Let's say this were a year from now. Keelan Russell, the incoming quarterback, and he signs a deal worth $500,000, and that's paid directly from the school. That's out of the football budget. Mm-hmm. Is that a 1-year deal? Like he's just getting that for this year? And is there any guarantee for year 2 or year 3? What's to hold him to year 2 and year 3? Is he just going to, is this just going to be, I'm going to enter free agency next offseason and we'll play it out from there? We'll renegotiate. Like this is where it becomes very difficult on I think most people would like to see the old school. You sign a commitment to come play at the school, you come to the school. That's been the toughest part. I always bring up, Corey, years ago, I was in the office of Coach Ed Ogeron at LSU, and they had their whole recruiting department. They had depth charts for 2019, 2020, 2021, and it was offense and defense. And it was, here's our quarterback, our running backs, our wide receivers, and all that. Like coaches used to plan this thing out 3, 4, 5 years down the road. You can't do that anymore. I mean,
no, you can't
those
at all.
Those days are gone. So I think that's what most coaches and schools, and I think fans would like to see us get back to is, okay, you can come to the school. Okay, we're going to pay you. But for the love of God, stick it out with us. Like, stay. Like, we need you here. A commitment's a commitment. Let's get you to stay here. Again, if a better opportunity pops up, and I don't know, like I don't want to restrict a kid, but I also think there should be some kind of guardrails to keep a kid coming to a school when he commits.
Yeah, I mean, contracts just make the most sense, whether it's like whether they're legally binding them to the university as an employee or just some sort of legally binding agreement to where the university and the athletic department can say, hey, we're gonna offer you a 3-year deal at $500 plus per year. And if you sign this, and they put, and there's got to be somewhere where they put terms in it. Like if going back to your example, Keelan Russell, if he wants to bounce, like let's say Kalen DeBoer gets fired, and he wants to get out of that deal. Well, there's some termination clauses and there's some things built in to where I think you structure it like an NFL contract where there's outs and buyouts and things like that, where he can get out, but the school that's bringing you in has to pay that buyout, which I think eats into their cap. And there's ways to do it to hold them to. And I think we're very, very close and on the precipice of that, but we're just not quite there yet. But this is going to be, like you said, this is going to be very interesting. Coaches' movements. I think you'll see coaches maybe move a little bit less because that again they want to see some things out as well. I think things will calm down a little bit. I'm really in favor of this, but one thing that really, and we'll talk about this next, but one thing that really fires me up about this is I think there's going to be a lot more parity in the SEC, and I think it's going to bring the bottom half closer to the top half, and you're going to see some shuffling where you wouldn't normally see shuffling. And we're going to talk about that next. But first, it's all about FanDuel. Chris, are you watching the NBA Finals?
Yeah, it's been exciting. The small market teams, Oklahoma City and Indiana Pacers. It's been a fun finals, and man, certainly something to bet on every night.
Yeah, absolutely. SGA and Tyrese Halliburton going at it. You can get a same game parlay. You can hedge your bets with a Halliburton and a SGA point total, but you can do all of that on FanDuel if you want. You can also take a look at that one. Smash you over on that. 4.5 wins for Vanderbilt for the 2025 season. I'm going to smash you over on that, and you should too. And here's how you do it. If you bet your first $5 bet, you get $200 in bonus bets if that first bet hits. Wouldn't that fire you up, Chris? Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great deal. If you never used FanDuel before, you go there, get signed up, super easy, and no better incentive to get signed up if you've never played before.
Not at all. And it's so much fun. There's so many prop bets. There's so many things you can do on the site. So like Chris said, sign up right here at FanDuel.com, create that account, place your first $5 bet for a chance to win $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel, your official sports betting partner of the NBA, and of course, college football too. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. And here's the reason right beside me that you should make Locked On SEC your second listen when you're finished here. But right now you're getting kind of the best of both worlds. So why wouldn't you tune into this episode? And of course, Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss, if you want some perspective on some members around the conference. Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn, Brandon Olson, Locked On Gators. Anybody in this conference, really, if you listen to our squad shows, you can get a preview of kind of what every show is going to be about. So check that out. But Chris, I mentioned something about parity. Okay. Now we talked about like the art of paying, and that's something we could spend weeks and weeks and months unraveling and trying to dig to the bottom of. We'll let the experts do that. But parity within the SEC, I think the closer you get to an NFL model, the more parity you're going to get. And that's what makes the NFL so good, because they have the salary cap, they have everything, the structure, and I've talked about it before, they have everything you need to make a really competitive, enjoyable, tough league. And I think college football is starting to head that way. Do you think, from an SEC perspective, the other conferences I'm sure will get a similar effect, but from the SEC's perspective, does that bring the bottom closer to the top? Does it being more parity? Like how do we, and this was one of my burning questions here, and I'll throw up this graphic. Does this settlement create some parity within the SEC and college football?
Well, I think you already started to see it last year. I mean, everybody who yelled the SEC sucks, I argued it wasn't the SEC sucked or had a down year. I thought they had a very good year in that there was parity, that there were some weeks where anybody could beat anybody. Look, when Vanderbilt beats Alabama and Oklahoma beats Alabama, and, we were seeing stuff every week. There were upsets happening in the SEC. Literally every week there was a big upset in the SEC last year.
Yeah,
somebody won that wasn't supposed to win.
Arkansas
supposed to win.
Tennessee. Yeah.
I mean, that to me speaks to, that is parity. That is a more leveled playing field. You go back about 15 years ago in the SEC, Ole Miss was struggling. The Mississippi State was an easy win. There were teams in this conference that you just knew they were going to roll over, and the powers that be, whatever they were at the time, 15, 20 years ago, it was LSU and Florida and Alabama, and, Tennessee was starting to kind of nosedive a little bit, but you kind of knew what to expect. Nobody has any idea what to expect this year in the SEC. And this is with the additions of Texas and Oklahoma as two big powers. I get it. Oklahoma wasn't great last year, but a traditional power. I mean, you only had we had 16 teams, Corey. Only 3 teams from the SEC didn't go to a bowl game. I mean, that to me is the ultimate parity. And so, yes, the transfer portal kind of leveled the playing field. When Vanderbilt adds a Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers, it leveled the playing field a little bit. Vanderbilt won some games they were not expected to. Kentucky had a really down year. I think they've done a nice job through the portal of adding some pieces. If Zach Calzada if he lives up to what he once was, that Kentucky's going to win some games they're not supposed to. Mississippi State, Blake Shapen's a good quarterback. Threw for a ton of yards at Baylor years ago. I think they're going to win an SEC game this year. I don't know if they'll get to 6 wins and get to a bowl game, but just the point being, those are the bottom dwellers. And then you got this logjam of about 7, 8, 9 teams in the middle of the conference that could be anywhere from 6 wins to 9 wins. And so that to me is the ultimate parity. And yes, when we get into this revenue share conversation now, yeah, I mean, if you got a kid that, Alabama's offering $200,000, but let's just say an offensive lineman, Bama goes, we'll give you $200,000. But Vanderbilt goes, we'll give you $450,000. I'm going to Vanderbilt. I mean, you're doubling what you're offering me. So those are just, you're going to see a little bit more of a balance, I think, there. And then I think you're going to see a little bit too from the smaller sports. I think, men's basketball, I think, if a Vanderbilt decides to allocate, if other schools are allocating $4 to $5 million and Vanderbilt says we're going to allocate $6 to $7 million, you have an edge there. You can get kids through the portal that the other schools won't be getting. So, it's just going to be really fascinating to see how that plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to kind of see how the roster construction does, and you're going to see, like we talked about, you're going to see a more of a developmental thing. And so when you recruit guys out of high school, some of these flyers and some of these guys, in the NFL, GMs don't make their money with their first and second round picks. GMs make their money with the day 3 picks. How many of those can you hit on? How many of those from 35 to the end of the roster, how many of those guys can perform at a high level? And it's all about finding those guys that are great players, but are worth it. And, because with the salary cap stuff and the limited revenue, you're not going to be able, the days of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, but the days of loading your roster 5 stars 4 deep, you're not going to be able to pay all those guys. And it becomes, and this was an interesting conversation. Pete Nakos of On 3, was talking about this yesterday. I saw a video. He said with some kids these days, some of these 16, 17-year-olds we're seeing coming out of high school, he said it's not really about give me the biggest duffel bag of cash now with this world we're moving into with the revenue share. He said it's about what perks can they get. He said NIL ask this year from kids is private flights, car leases, even real estate. That's what a lot of these kids are looking for now. And so it kind of does become okay, so let's just pick a school. I don't know. Let's say Vanderbilt. What does Nashville have to offer? And I think this gives Vanderbilt even a better chance of getting from that bottom third into that middle third and being able to compete, because you have one of the fastest growing cities in the country. You have all the amenities, the entertainment, the real estate value, obviously you can get cars anywhere, but the private flights and things like that. You can get a lot more. I feel like you can get a lot more perks here in Nashville than you can in Fayetteville, Arkansas, or Oxford, Mississippi, or Gainesville, Florida, or wherever, and that to me seems like an advantage.
Yeah, well, and that's what's going to be very interesting is, let's just pick a 5-star O lineman, and let's say he's got Alabama and all these schools. Let's say Vanderbilt's on his list. Like I said, when we're talking 13 to 16 million total for your football roster, if Alabama's offering $250K and Vanderbilt can up it to 300, can they throw in some of those extra perks? Go, hey, we're going to pay $300K this year out of revenue share, but we're going to get you an NIL deal. We've got, Bridgestone Corporation here, and, they've got private jets, and we're going to get you a private jet you can use anytime you want. Mm-hmm. Or we got to deal with an apartment company. They're going to sign an NIL deal with you. All you got to do is post some videos to social media every week. We'll get you a free apartment that you can lease to own or something like that. So that to me, it becomes what kind of perks can you get the kid more? And I'm really curious, Corey, remember the terms improper benefits? Mm-hmm. Is that even going to exist anymore? Because what is an improper benefit?
It's nothing now. It's the amenities that we're talking about. It's the sweeteners. It's the private jet or it's the car that you get. Now it may be a Nissan because Nissan is headquartered here, but it's totally free. And so, it's things like that. It's, hey, you never have to pay for a meal here. You can, you've got free rides. We'll get you a deal with Uber to where if you want to go to Broadway, you can go to Broadway as much as you want. Just don't do it the day before a game. We've got a ton of things available for you. Concert venues, Bridgestone, you get a deal with Bridgestone. Hey, you get free access to any event we have at Bridgestone Arena. Predators games, concerts, SEC basketball tournament, whatever you want to do inside of Bridgestone Arena, you've got free access. Like those are the things that I think are going to separate.
Here's where it gets tricky, though, is the school can't facilitate that. I've been told the collectives, they knew this was coming. So a lot of schools have already pivoted. The collectives have said, yeah, we can't take that $1 million from the booster and funnel it to you, but what we'll do is we will work with you individually. We'll help create your brand. We'll get your Instagram going. We'll get your TikTok going. We'll get all this. We're going to create this platform and try to get you more followers and all that. And then in turn, this will attract companies to come in and want to hire you for name, image, and likeness deals. That car dealership down the road, they'll sign you to an NIL deal. They will get you a car. You'll go do an autograph signing with them, bingo, bango, whatever. So that's the kind of stuff that the collectives are really going to have to get back to. Again, back to the root of what name, image, and likeness was supposed to be, as opposed to just funneling money through booster money to players individually. But yeah, man, it's again, schools are going to have to get really creative with how they do this, because the revenue share, as much as we want to shout $20 million, that is not unlimited cash. It will go up in the future years. Don't get me wrong. That number is going to keep climbing, but $20 million for your entire athletic department, it doesn't go very far when we're talking about paying players tons of money.
And speaking of not going very far, we're going to talk about how it goes for basketball, baseball, and the non-rev sports. We're going to do that next. All right, wrapping up the show here. Locked On Vandy. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Again, this guy is the reason why you should listen to Locked On SEC. We do. He leads the charge on the squad shows too that you see. This most recent squad show is getting quite the traction, so you should check those out. But and the answer to your question, audience, is yes. We are going to go overtime, right? So that's what we're going to do. So anyway, got Chris Gordy here, and got some burning questions. Like I said, it's going to this thing, like we've talked about, it's going to benefit Vandy a tremendous amount of because when you factor in the NIL stuff that you can do, there's plenty of opportunities. So I don't think Anchor Impact, which is the collective here, doesn't have to reach all that far to find perfect NIL deals. So one of the things I want to know is, the non-rev sports and of course the roster limits are going to be in place. When you're talking about scholarships, I think there was a clause that said the schools can offer unlimited scholarships. Is that really just going to be where they don't for basketball, for football, where they don't offer any scholarships to those sports where the athletic departments, we're going to save all our scholarships for women's basketball, we're going to save it for golf, we're going to save it for tennis, we're going to save it for, the non-rev Olympic sports, things like that. How does this work for that? Are there going to be, I think the sentiment is people are afraid that there's going to be sports that are going to be cut because of all this.
Well, it certainly is possible. So many of those non-revenue generating sports, it sounds like a great term, but it is exactly what it is. You're a drain on us. Like you're like a kid that lives at home that keeps asking for an allowance every week. And it's like, bro, I just gave you $100. I need another 100. Like, get a job. That's what you would do to a kid that does this. Instead, here with college campuses, we continue to, I don't know, to pick a sport, rowing. You have a rowing team and everybody's on scholarship, and then you pay to fly them, whatever, probably not private, but commercial or whatever. Like you look at the end of the year and you go, we lost $7 million on the rowing team. Well, why the hell, most businesses will look at it and go, why are we continue to fund this thing that's a black hole? Like, it's eating us up. Like, why are we continuing to do that? So again, Title IX is going to be something that's going to get very interesting on this, because you have to have X amount of female sports. If you have a man sport, you got to have a woman's sport. And so, that will get very interesting because it does become, I think you can go to court and argue, Judge, we are in the business of making money, and this is the sport that generates the money, and it pays for everything else. So, you know what? We're going to have a football team, and that's all we're going to have.
Yeah,
well, they're going to argue. Well, Title IX says no. You got to have this, this, and this. So that's where things will get very interesting. But with football, basically you're going to shrink to 105 players. Some people said, most schools that means you're cutting 20 players. I don't think it means you're cutting 20 players. I just think it means you're doing away with walk-ons. Like instead of having 85, 90 scholarship players, you're going to have 105 scholarship players. Everybody's going to be on scholarship. You just won't have walk-ons, and we won't have that, that sixth string. Your practice team might look a little bit different. You might actually have some incoming freshmen who were 4-stars on the practice squad team throughout the week, as opposed to a bunch of walk-ons getting pushed around. Now, they did say some of those players will be able to be grandfathered in, so we'll see what happens there. But basically, the gist of it is this. CBS Sports kind of broke it up. They said, you got your $20.5 million. They said 75% of that future revenue will go to football. 15% is projected to go to men's basketball, 5% to women's basketball, and then 5% for all the remaining sports. So that includes baseball, softball, women's tennis, men's tennis, track and field, indoor, outdoor. I mean, that's a lot of stuff for 5% of 20 million. I mean, you do the math. We're talking, what we have 100,000 left for the softball team. Like that's not going to go very far. So that's where I think a school like Vanderbilt, could look, you want to spend on football. Absolutely. But man, wouldn't it be an edge if Vandy says, you know what, we're going to put 12 million towards football. And then we're going to use that 8 million to go build a stronger basketball team. We're going to tell Tim Corbin, hey, Tim, look how close we were this year. Let's go get that big stud pitcher in the portal. Let's, So I think for a school like Vanderbilt, this is absolutely, you should look at those other sports and using that money elsewhere. Again, like, Diego Pavia didn't break the bank, right? It's not like that was Carson Beck asking for $4 million a year.
Right.
I don't think Vanderbilt's ever going to be in that space.
No.
So again, like build up your other sports, and we could be talking about Vanderbilt, 2 years from now, go 6-6. Clark Lee's doing a fine job. They make a bowl game, but we could be talking about, well, baseball won a championship, and basketball went to the Final Four, and so like,
and they're real close as it is, Chris.
Yeah, if I'm Vanderbilt, I'm allocating that money a little bit more to those other sports.
Yeah, no doubt. And, when you talk about those other sports, I think, with NIL opportunities, like I think there's some incentive-based stuff that you can do with those to kind of make up for, because Texas Tech got creative with their NIL, with one of their pitchers for softball. They paid her $1 million. I don't know how that's going to work for them now with this rev sharing, but
they're not going to pay that. I mean, that's the reality. Right. Is like a real offer for a softball pitcher with this deal is going to be like $50K, like that's the realistic. And then you can get her an NIL deal, but again, it's got to go through the clearinghouse and it's got to be fair market value. What fair market value are you going to find that a company is going to pay $1 million for a softball pitcher? Like the clearinghouse is going to deny that from the get-go. So again, I think it's even more incumbent on the kids to start thinking more realistically here. It hurts them because it's less earning power, but I think, again, this is what everybody wanted to agree to, and this is where we are.
No, I mean, I think it's good for the sport in general. I think it's good for, and football drives a lot of this, obviously, and it's good with football not getting out of control. I think it brings it back to where now your product can be really, really good, and I think you're going to start generating more money. That cap's going to go up, like we said, and it's gonna trickle down. Things are going to. Eventually things are going to get good or better for those non-ref sports. And maybe they go out and make some partnership deals with some businesses locally. And maybe they go to the high school model and say, hey, whatever we want, we have to go get, and we have to hustle for it. And maybe you see that model. I don't know.
Well, that's what was interesting. And it seems like the Big Ten and some of those other conferences put a hold on it, but they were talking about private equity and having, businesses invest in the programs and all that. I mean, are we talking maybe 4 years from now? The SEC's like NASCAR, like we got patches all over the jerseys of corporate sponsors.
I mean, you see that in the pro sports, like at least with the practice stuff. Like you see, the outfield wall looks like a billboard. It looks like a massive NASCAR. You have the patches on the sleeves and stuff, or like golf. You just have them littered with branding on their clothes. And it's not just a very clean, like collegiate look. It's, it's like you have MasterCard here, you have, Amex here, Visa there, NetJets, or whatever the branding is. Like it's just all over the clothing. It's all over the uniforms. It's on the fields. It's everywhere.
We already know one element where this revenue is going to go up in the very near future, because the SEC, the 9-game conference schedule is sitting right on their 5-yard line. Like all they got to do is call ESPN and say, we're a go, and that money goes up. You go from playing an 8-games SEC schedule to a 9-game SEC slate. The ESPN and Disney have already said they'll pony up the cash, they'll pay what that'll take. So what does that mean? It means higher, more revenue share for 2026 and beyond. So that's one we know is coming. That's going to up that number. And so, yeah, I just look at it and say $20 million per school it's a little low right now, but again, I think those numbers are only going to go up.
It's a starting point. I mean, it really is. But Chris, thanks for joining me, man. Locked on SEC. Please check him out. Check out the squad shows. You know where to go. I mean, at Chris Gordy on X, all social media platforms at Chris Gordy.
I believe so. Yeah. Just search him. You'll find it.
You'll find him. He's like prime time. He's not hard to find. So Chris Gordy, thanks for joining me, man. The house settlement, it's going to be good. I think we have a starting point, but I think eventually it'll be good for all athletics and things like that. But if you like what you hear, subscribe at Locked On Vandy on all social media platforms for this show. Check out the entire SEC. Look at the schedule and go watch the shows affiliated with our schedule. Enjoy those and get a glimpse of what the other teams are doing. If you need listen beyond that, Locked On Portal with Brian Smith is a place to go. But for Chris Gordy, I'm Corey Burton. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you back here next time on the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Peace.